What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Shameless Watch Collector. Today, we're looking at the second of 3 Starking watches coming to the channel, and I think this might be the most interesting of the entire group. This is the Starking AM0603, an automatic internal bezel watch with a striking design, some surprisingly impressive specs, and another price tag that is difficult to believe in the best way possible. So let's take an in-depth look at the Starking AM0603 and assign it a final grade. Let's get into it. Let's get into the review, working through our normal categories, starting with dimensions. The Starking AM0603 comes in at 40.5 millimeters in diameter, 12.5 millimeters thick, including the crystal and case back, and 47.4 millimeters lug to lug. And those are, without question, exceptionally well executed dimensions for an internal bezel diver. These types of watches are frequently just as thick as external bezel divers, if not even thicker, and that's due to the additional architecture required to accommodate the rotating bezel beneath the crystal. But that is not the case here. At only 12.5 millimeters thick in total, the AM0603 maintains an impressively streamlined profile. It never feels excessively bulky, and it avoids the tedious wearing experience that can sometimes come with this style of watch. The 47.4 millimeter lug-to-lug measurement lands right where you'd want it to as well, allowing the watch to take full advantage of the compact wearing characteristics an internal bezel can provide. The silicone strap also helps the watch sit planted and comfortable on wrist, while the curvature of the case allows it to follow the shape of your arm beautifully. As far as dive watch dimensions are concerned, the AM0603 lands directly in what I would consider the sweet spot. Let's keep it rolling and talk materials. The materials used here represent a significant, and I mean significant, step up from the previous Starking we reviewed. However, one element does remain the same, and that is the use of 304L stainless steel. Once again, I appreciate Starking's transparency regarding the material, and just like the previous watch, the 304L stainless steel has been completely adequate throughout my time with it. The transitions between brushed and polished surfaces look phenomenal. The finishing is crisp, the contrasting textures are clearly defined, and the case still looks almost exactly as it did on day 1 when I removed it from the box. And trust me, this thing has already been through a lot. I've been moving houses for the past few weeks while testing this watch, so saying it has endured some abuse would be a massive understatement. Despite all of that though, the case still looks fantastic. I have not found any significant scratches, chips, or any obvious damage. I've been equally impressed and surprised by how well it's held up. We have 2 screw-down crowns positioned on the right side of the case. The lower crown handles your standard time and date adjustments, while the upper crown rotates the internal bezel. And unfortunately, and man, this pains me to say, that upper crown is also connected to easily my biggest complaint about this watch. And it's a problem that I know could be an immediate deal breaker for some of you. Before we discuss it, I want to make something very clear. I brought this issue directly to Starking a month ago. They were frustrated to learn that my example had this problem, and they seemed determined to make sure it would not remain an issue going forward. And there's also always the possibility that this problem is just exclusive to my particular watch. But on my AM0603, it is virtually impossible to line up the bezel pip perfectly at 12 o'clock. You may have already noticed the misalignment in some of the footage and photos. And the worst part is the reason it happens. No matter what I do, the internal bezel shifts slightly as I tighten the crown. And I've heard about this happening on other internal bezel watches around this price point. And from what I understand, it's not unheard of and it's fairly common. I just simply have never experienced it before, but man, it's frustrating. It's not personally enough to make me stop wearing this watch, but anyone who's extremely sensitive to alignment issues would absolutely hate my particular example. And what makes it even more disappointing is that the actual bezel action is fantastic elsewhere. The bezel rotates bidirectionally, which is always convenient and awesome. And the movement itself feels smooth, controlled, and satisfying. Adjusting the bezel is genuinely enjoyable, right up until you try to lock it into place. That's why the crown issue hurts so badly. The mechanism is otherwise executed so well. And again, this may be limited to my example. It may have already been corrected, especially since, again, I mentioned this a month ago. But I have to judge the watch that is physically on my wrist in front of me, and this issue is going to hurt the final grade. Fortunately, there is still plenty of good material execution to discuss. That includes the design of both crowns. They feature a pronounced grip pattern that complements the rugged character of the watch nicely, and the lower crown is engraved with the Starking flower logo. Finding two screw-down crowns at this price was already a pleasant surprise, and both feel substantial and relatively secure during normal operation. Turn the watch over and we find an engraved stainless steel screw and case back. The Starking logo is positioned prominently in the center with several specifications engraved around the perimeter. As usual, I tend to prefer a deeply stamped or embossed logo over a standard engraving, but this engraving still does look very clean. All of these elements combine to provide 100 meters of water resistance. That does fall a little short of the 200 meters that I usually consider standard for a true modern dive watch, but it's also far beyond anything I would realistically need during my everyday life. I mean, if most of us are being completely honest with ourselves, 5 meters of genuine water resistance would probably cover the most aquatic activities our watches would ever experience in their lifetimes. So while 100 meters isn't especially impressive within the dive watch category, it's still completely practical for me. Then we have the silicone strap. The strap certainly doesn't look or feel cheap overall, but the attention to detail feels noticeably underdeveloped. The silicone itself is thick, flexible, comfortable, and reassuringly substantial. The buckle is also especially impressive. It has a sturdy construction, a neatly brushed finish, and a nicely engraved Starking logo. Unfortunately though, the buckle is the only part of the strap that contains any distinctive branding or design work. The strap is otherwise completely sterile on both the outside and inside, and does not include any quick release spring bars. This is where some of the magic can become lost for me. I really enjoy those small details such as logos or branding hidden on the underside of the strap. Those elements make a strap feel intentionally developed for the watch instead of pulled from a generic parts catalog. The absence of quick release spring bars also makes it feel like day-to-day convenience just wasn't a major consideration here. The strap design though is ultimately subjective, because I know plenty of collectors appreciate a clean, completely sterile strap. And to be fair, the comfort and physical quality are both very good. I just would really love a quick release. Overall though, the AM0603 represents an impressive and extremely welcome step forward from the previous Starking that we reviewed. Time to find out what's powering this watch and talk movement. The Starking AM0603 is powered by an automatic movement that is considerably more familiar than the caliber that we found in the previous Starking. This is the Miyota 8215. But before we discuss it, I want to quickly correct something from my previous Starking review. In that video, I said I couldn't determine which movement was powering the watch. Starking later informed me that it was the SK6 automatic movement, which is an in-house upgraded version of the 1813 caliber. That additional information raised the previous watch's final grade from a B to a B+. Back to the Miyota 8215 inside this watch. This is an automatic movement that we have been seeing with increasing frequency in watches around this price point, largely due to the rising cost and more limited availability of Seiko NH series movements. And personally, I have no problem with the Miyota 8215. It's a dependable, widely available, and relatively easy to service Japanese automatic movement. It operates at 21,600 vibrations per hour, giving the seconds hand a respectable sweep, and it provides a power reserve of around 42 hours. My primary complaint with the 8215 is that the unidirectional rotor can become noticeably noisy inside certain cases. However, that characteristic does vary significantly from watch to watch, and luckily, it has not been a problem here. This particular 8215 is nearly silent during normal wear, which I always appreciate. There isn't anything especially luxurious, advanced, or exotic about the movement inside the AM0603, but there also isn't really anything to criticize. Time to have some fun and talk dial and design. So far, Starking has impressed me in certain areas and disappointed me in others, but this is the first time the brand has genuinely blown me away. Because my goodness, the Starking AM0603 is among the most visually captivating watches I've encountered in person compared to how it appears in online photos. First, let me explain why I chose this extremely New York Knicks-esque color combination when several more restrained options are available. It certainly isn't because I'm a Knicks fan, because I am definitely not one of those. At the risk of losing a substantial portion of my subscribers, I'm going to keep the identity of which team I'm a diehard NBA fan of to myself for now, but it certainly isn't the Knicks. Congrats on the ring though, guys. I chose this colorway because I didn't own anything remotely similar to it, and it felt like the version where Starking allowed the personality of the design to shine through most clearly. Personally, I think the black and gray version may be the most conventionally attractive option available for this watch. So with that in mind, I wasn't expecting to fall in love with this particular color combination. but when I removed it from the box and saw it beneath proper lighting, my jaw hit the floor like Karl Anthony Towns does whenever anyone touches him. The colors and overall composition of this dial are outstanding in person, working from the outside inward. The blue used for the internal bezel and the outer dial ring is absolutely gorgeous. It doesn't resemble the bright New York Knicks blue portrayed in many of the online photos. In person, it appears closer to a rich, glossy navy. That darker tone brings an unexpected degree of elegance and restraint to the dial. It establishes the dominant color of the watch without overpowering the brighter elements surrounding it. Then we reach the white section, which is probably my favorite part of the entire dial. The surface contains a delicate sparkling texture that produces a remarkable glisten beneath natural light. I was not expecting that effect in the slightest. Under softer lighting, the white section appears tasteful and relatively restrained. But as soon as direct light reaches it from the right angle, the texture wakes up and injects an entirely different level of energy into the design. And speaking of injecting energy into a watch, the orange accents are brilliant. To my extremely colorblind eyes, this shade does resemble New York Knicks orange, and it works harmoniously with the rest of the palette in a way that it has no business doing. The orange is vibrant, playful, and instantly noticeable, but it manages to walk that narrow line between being energetic and becoming overwhelming. That balance is incredibly difficult to achieve in my opinion. Everything combines to create a quirky, expressive, and thoroughly enjoyable dial design. The attention to detail throughout the design is exceptional as well. The hour markers sit neatly inside individual recesses carved into the blue outer ring, creating a layered appearance that feels far more intricate than I expected at this price. The indices themselves look prominent and well constructed. Their orange centers match the primary dial accents beautifully, while the polished borders add a welcome degree of refinement. I also love the thin black frame surrounding the date window. It's a tiny design choice, but it connects perfectly with the black minute markings around the dial and gives the complication a deliberate, integrated appearance. The date wheel sits properly centered inside the aperture, and I'm so happy that Starking resisted the temptation to add any form of magnification to that date. And while I criticize the silicone strap for its lack of branding and individuality, the color match is really close. The blue silicone carries a very similar tone to the blue in the dial, allowing the entire watch to maintain a fluid and cohesive appearance. Covering this dial is what Starking describes as high-strength mineral glass. Sapphire would have been a welcome addition, but the mineral crystal appears clear, sturdy, and respectable for the price. As I mentioned earlier, this watch has endured a significant amount of accidental abuse over the past month. The crystal has collided with way too many surfaces for me to be proud of, and it still looks great. My only criticism is a subjective one. I don't completely love the distortion produced around the outer edges of the crystal. From many viewing angles, it noticeably warps the bezel numerals beneath it. That effect may appeal to collectors who enjoy vintage-inspired distortion, but it's slightly too prominent for my taste. The lume layout on this watch is badass. Luminous material has been applied to the hands, hour indices, and internal bezel, giving the watch a complete and attractive nighttime appearance. It also uses a dual color configuration. The hands produce a pale yellow, orangish glow that closely resembles their appearance under normal lighting, while the indices and internal bezel emit a bright green. Starking doesn't provide any information regarding the exact luminous compound used, and I hate to say this, but the footage is being a little bit generous to the lume's actual strength. Anyone who has filmed lume before may have experienced this. For some reason, luminous material frequently appears dramatically brighter on camera than it does to the naked eye. And that is definitely happening here. The lume isn't offensively weak or anything, but I'd be lying through my teeth if I told you it looked as intense in person as it does in this footage. But I can say the structure and color arrangement is excellent. We also have several of the smaller design details that I always appreciate. The Starking flower engraved on the lower crown, the decorated case back, and the signed buckle. Taken as a complete package, this is a drop-dead gorgeous and incredibly charming watch. Let's talk money and get into price and value. The Starking AM0603 can be purchased for around $89 on AliExpress before applying any coin discounts, promotional coupons, or platform-wide sales. Once again, Starking is delivering the kind of value that makes several of the watch's shortcomings considerably easier to forgive. Does the price make the internal bezel's inability to remain perfectly aligned acceptable? No, but it does make elements such as the relatively weak mystery lume, mineral crystal, and the 304 stainless steel case far easier to understand. And at the same time, the price makes the Miyota 8215, 100 meters of water resistance, 2 screw-down crowns, and remarkably intricate dial feel even more impressive. The dial especially looks carefully designed, visually sophisticated, and substantially more expensive than the price of the watch would suggest. And even though this watch costs around 40% more than the previous Starking that we reviewed, I consider this one even stronger value. Let's assign this watch a final grade. The Starking AM0603 gets a B+. It came extremely close to earning an A-. I absolutely adore this thing. The dimensions could not have been executed better. At 40.5mm in diameter, 12.5mm thick, and 47.4 lug to lug, the AM0603 is about as well proportioned as an internal bezel diver can get. The watch carries a convincing amount of wrist presence while remaining compact, balanced, and comfortable throughout the day. The materials are underwhelming in a few areas, but the overall execution remains impressive. Starking continues to demonstrate that 304 stainless steel does not automatically represent a dramatic downgrade from 316L, especially when the finishing is this clean. The transitions between brushed and polished surfaces are crisp. The case has held up exceptionally well, and nothing about the exterior looks or feels careless. The 100 meters of water resistance is also fairly unremarkable for a dive style watch, but is also still plenty for the overwhelming majority of owners. It's not a strength, but it doesn't feel like a serious weakness either. The Miyota 8215 is a recognizable, respected, and dependable automatic movement from Japan. It's not anything to write home about, but there is pretty much nothing to complain about at this price, especially when the rotor is this quiet. The design is where the AM0603 really shines. It is absolutely gorgeous. It looks well above its price point, and its personality is impossible to ignore. The combination of glossy navy blue, textured white, and vibrant orange creates a dial that feels playful, intricate, and surprisingly refined. The level of charm is screaming in your face just as loudly as the attention to detail is. A sub 100 watch has no business looking this distinctive or this expensive. It's also one of those designs that needs to be seen in person to be fully appreciated. And then we have the price. At around $89 before discounts, this watch continues to establish Starking's place within the AliExpress watch market as a brand offering an enormous amount of watch for very little money. That value makes several of these shortcomings easier to tolerate, but I cannot excuse all of them. The internal bezel specifically, and its inability to remain reliably aligned once the crown is tightened, is nearly enough to drop this watch by an entire letter grade. But again, this issue may be exclusive to my example. It may have already been corrected, but the watch on my wrist still has the issue, and I know it would be an immediate deal breaker for a lot of you. If I wasn't confident that Starking was going to fix it, the penalty would have been much harsher. Then we have the smaller annoyances, such as a strap that feels mass-produced instead of specifically designed for this watch, despite how well the blue matches the dial. The absence of quick-release bars is especially disappointing, and the sterile design leaves the strap feeling unfinished compared to the dial. But at the end of the day, I believe this watch may be the lowest priced automatic internal bezel diver currently available on AliExpress, and that is nothing to sneeze at. With a perfectly functioning bezel, the AM0603 would become a massive problem for other AliExpress brands producing compressor-style and internal bezel watches. I'll leave this watch linked in the description if you want to check it out. And thank you to Starking for providing this watch to the channel so we can take an honest, in-depth look at it. Thank you all so much for watching this SWC watch review. Let me know in the comments what you think of the Starking AM0603. We have another busy week coming your guys' way. Tons of reviews, Temu Does It Suck episodes, and much more. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss anything. I appreciate all of you guys so much for the support, and I'll see you all very soon for the next video. But until then, Shameless Watch Collector, signing out. And always remember, it's not that serious.